Yeah, I think we can.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Ritvika from Khurana and Khurana Advocates and IP Attorneys. And today we have this discussion on best practices for trademark opposition proceedings. So the topic is pretty comprehensive, and I would like to cover the grounds of opposition, the applicable sections, the grounds of counterstatement. We will also discuss some relevant case laws simultaneously, and we'll try to briefly cover the evidence stage. So I understand you would be having questions. Please feel free to ask questions. However, it would be nice if we can hold the questions till the end of the session. I'll take them all one by one. Okay, so back to the topic. So we are aware that, a mark remains advertised in the journal for a period of 4 months, giving opportunity to any interested party to file an opposition within the set period. So the first question that arises is that who can file an opposition, right? So if you see section 21 subsection 1, it clearly says that any person may file an opposition within the prescribed period in the prescribed manner. So which means that any person who might not be having any self-interest in opposing the mark can also file. Maybe he may as well be, concerned with the non-registrable quotient, non-distinctive quotient of the mark. Having said that, generally we receive oppositions from proprietors who consider the advertised mark to be somewhat similar to their trademark. So from a proprietor's perspective, if we see the question or the query which may arise in their mind firstly is that, whether he needs to be the registered proprietor of his trademark. Well, the answer is no. If we come to the practitioner's perspective per se, like if you come across a mark in the journal and if you consider it to be, similar to one of your client's mark, or if you find some similarity between the rival goods or the services as well. So, I don't think that we should instantly serve a notice of opposition to the concerned applicant. But what we should do first is like we should ensure that the mark which we are willing to oppose on behalf of our client is also subsequent in use. So basically, we can check that with the e-register, the user claimed in respect of the advertised mark. We can also tally it with the user affidavit if any has been filed by the concerned applicant. Also, we can search the applicant's company website, a few third-party websites. Here by third-party websites, I mean, maybe Amazon or Flipkart, etc., to check the first date of availability of the applicant's products. And all this to, ascertain that the mark is subsequent in use, right? Also, additionally, I feel that we can do a quick search in the public search portal to check whether other variants of the advertised mark have been filed by the concerned applicant. And if they have been filed, then we can also tally their date of use. All this to ensure again that we are the prior user. So if you see, we are, putting a lot of emphasis upon ensuring that we are the prior user simply because the Act mandates for the same. If we see section 34 of the Act, it clearly says that a proprietor of a trademark cannot interfere with the rights of a prior user, even if his trademark has been, registered on an earlier date, right? So here I want to refer to the case of Neon Laboratories Limited, the Medical Technologies Limited, where I think this is a very apt example. And also here the Supreme Court has beautifully intertwined the provision of section 34 and section 47 while ruling in favor of the prior user, of course. Just a minute. Here, both Medical Technologies Limited and Neon Laboratories Limited were engaged in the manufacture of pharma products. The petitioner was using the trademark Profol since 1998, whereas the respondent had the mark Profol registered since 1992 and was using it since 2004. The petitioner came to know about the use of the mark Rofol by the respondent on 2005 and filed a suit for passing off against them before the High Court Gujarat. And a temporary injunction was granted against the respondent, who then filed an appeal before the Supreme Court, arguing that the mark Neon Laboratories Limited, now the appellant, has the mark Rofol registered since 1992, when Medical Technologies Limited, now the respondent, was not present in the market with his trademark Rofol. However, the appellant admitted to use the mark Rofol only since 2004. The Supreme Court, relying upon Section 34, opined that a registered proprietor of a trademark does not possess the right to prevent use by another party of an identical mark if an identical mark. Provision 47, which provide the court, clarified that the legislative intent behind Section 47 is to ensure that an application alone and such right is lost. So, application made by an act for 5 years from the date of such registration. Generally, the apex court agreed to the decision passed by the Gujarat High Court in the matter. So I think the key takeaway from this case is that the advantage given to prior user not only over registered proprietor but also over a prior adopter. So merely adopting a trademark on a prior date and obtaining registration without putting the mark to commercial use will not automatically create rights in our favor, right? Okay, I got a couple of good morning here from Mohan S. Manse, Advocate High Court. Good morning, sir. Good morning, Advocate Kashmira Karnal. To the grounds of opposition now. First and foremost, we need to prove the deceptive similarity between the advertised mark and the opponent's mark. You know, here we cannot submit that the marks are similar when we are analyzing them or scrutinizing them. Simply because they are not meant to be analyzed, but they are always meant to be judged on the basis of first impression, or they are always meant to be compared as a whole. This we refer to as the anti-dissection rule, right? But for instance, say that, you know, the advertised mark, which we are willing to oppose, is a composite label, which bears the word which forms the opponent's mark. In this case, we need to prove that the disputed word is the salient feature of the applicant's mark, right? So I have an apt case for this, which is Parle Products v. JP & Co. Here, the appellant was the registered proprietor of the trade dress comprising the word Parle Glucose Biscuits, and it came to know that the respondents are selling biscuits under a label which is deceptively similar to their label. The respondent contended that there are a lot of differences in the competing labels, pointing out towards the minute details, while the matter traveled from the district court to the High Court and then to the Supreme Court. While district court and High Court emphasized upon the point of dissimilarities and ruled in favor of the respondent, the Supreme Court reversed the order of observing whether one mark is deceptively similar to another. The broad and essential feature of the two are to be considered, and further stated that it has no doubt that the defendant's wrapper is deceptively similar to the plaintiff's wrapper, and accordingly ruled in favor of the plaintiff. Would Section 34 interfere with the rights under Section 47? Akshay is asking. No, it will not interfere with the rights under Section 47. It can be intertwined with Section 47. Section 47 is usually, you know, raised by the applicant while filing a rectification petition, and also Section 47, you know, basically provides that any you know, an application for registration merely on the basis of being registered from an earlier date cannot be valid, and the mark should be put to use. If there is a continuous period of 5 years absence of use from the date of the registration by an application by an aggrieved party, the said mark might get removed from the register. So it will not interfere, but it will contribute, you can say. Yeah. So the next is we can submit on the difference between the goods or services, whether they are identical or bear some nexus, due to which they may be sold through the same trade channels or same outlets, generating a scope of confusion or deception amongst the consumers, right? Thirdly, we can submit upon prior use, which I have elaborated previously. Now moving to the sections. If we see section 9(2)(a), it states that a mark shall not be registered if it is of such nature to deceive the public or cause confusion. While section 11(1) talks about likelihood of confusion caused for being identical or similar with an earlier mark in respect of same or similar goods or services. I remember when I initially started drafting oppositions, I was I was told actually not to mention about emphasize about the similarity with the opponent's mark while quoting the provisions of section 9(2)(a), which apparently is concerned with the inherent deceptive nature of the mark. However, I eventually figured that the scope of the said section is pretty broad, and we need not be so rigid in quoting the sections, which certainly can be, beneficially intertwined, right? Now moving on to section 11(2), which is applicable if the opponent's mark is a well-known mark. In such case, it is not necessary to prove the rival goods or services are similar, which means that the opposed mark may not qualify for registration, even if it is, claimed for dissimilar goods or dissimilar services. Moving on to section 11(3)(a), which deals with passing off. But talking about passing off, we need to talk about the principle of classical trinity. Here, this is a test that requires the claimant to prove the presence of the following three elements, which is goodwill owned by the claimant. There was a misrepresentation. The claimant has already suffered damages or is likely to suffer damages due to such misrepresentation. So here the opponent can, however, quote the provision of section 11(3)(a) in the notice of opposition, submitting that there is a likelihood of facilitation of passing off from the applicant. Okay. Am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. Okay, the next section would be section 11(10)(1), which states that a registrar shall protect a well-known mark against identical or similar marks. So to apply the provisions of section 11(10), the opponent has to prove that his mark is well-known. Now, talking about proving well-known status, let's discuss the case of ITC Limited V3N Products Limited, where the Honorable Appellate Board emphasizing upon section 11(a), which says that where a mark has been determined to be well known in at least one relevant section of the public in India by any court or registrar, the registrar shall consider that trademark as a well-known trademark under the Act. So the appellate court stated that the well-known mark label cannot be granted for asking. There must be strong evidence to prove the case of the person claiming that his mark is a well-known mark. The determination that a mark is well-known will be arrived at only strong evidence. And section 11(2) provides that bad faith either of the applicant or the opponent relating to the trademark has to be considered. Here, by bad faith, on part of the opponent, you can, say that he practically had no reasons to file the opposition. That the marks indeed were not similar, did not bear any resemblance whatsoever, and the line of business is also totally different. So basically, the opposition is not based on legitimate grounds, or the opponent is the subsequent user. So all this to a certain, like to kind of submit that the opponent has filed the opposition in bad faith. While on part of applicant is that if we can't prove the honesty involved in the adoption, honesty involved in the use, this is where we can kind of submit on the bad faith and provide the provision of section 11(10)(2). The PPT is available, right, to everybody?
Yes, it's
the slide is I have shared the screen, so you can view the slides, right?
yes.
Okay. Now moving forward to section 29, which deals with infringement of rights vested upon the opponent through registration. The opponent can quote the provision of section 29 if his mark is registered. Okay. So once the notice of opposition is received by the applicant, he gets 2 months time to respond, which is again, filed through form TMO. Now talking about the grounds of counter statement. First and foremost, let's talk about the defense of overall dissimilarity, which I have already emphasized upon before. And there are numerous case laws for anti-dissection rule here, but I would refer to the one which is Cadila Laboratories Limited, the Dabur India Limited. Here, the Delhi High Court held that the competing trademarks Mexit and Zexit have different and distinguished prefix, one having syllable M and the other having Z. There is no possibility of Mexit being pronounced and or read as Zexit under any circumstances. As has been settled, we also held that meticulous comparison of words letter by letter and syllable by syllable is not necessary, and phonetic or visual similarity of the marks must be considered. Moving on to the next round, which is dissimilarity between the goods or services. Now it is a clear-cut defense, when the line of business is totally different or the classes are different. But if the marks are filed for say under the same class, for instance, class 3, and the opponent let's take an instance that if the opponent is selling or has claimed the mark in respect of face wash covered under class 3, while the applicant has claimed deodorant under class 3. Here I feel it would be apt to quote the provision of section 28(1), which says that registration of a trademark will guarantee the registered proprietor the exclusive right to use the mark in respect of the goods or services claimed and accordingly obtain relief in case of infringement. Here I have 2 cases to rely upon. One is Nandini Deluxe v. Karnataka Cooperative Milk Producers Federation Limited, where the Supreme Court observed that the proprietor of a trademark cannot enjoy monopoly over the entire class of goods if he is not using the same in respect of certain goods falling under the same class. And the next is Vishnu Das versus the Wazir Sultan Tobacco Co. Limited, where the Supreme Court observed that a manufacturer who is only trading in some articles under a certain class with no intention to trade in another article in the same class cannot enjoy monopoly in the same class. So the key takeaway is registration with regard to one category of goods is no bar to registration for other goods falling in the same class. Okay. Next comes the defense of prior use. So if the applicant can prove that he is the prior user of the mark, then the case will take a clear-cut U-turn in his favor. So the grounds which have been put forth by the opponent so far in the notice of opposition will now squarely apply in favor of the applicant. So here the applicant can submit that only if obviously he can prove that he is the prior user, that since the opponent is the subsequent user, if there is any likelihood of confusion or deception, the opponent owes a justification for the same. Of defense would be peaceful coexistence. Sometimes we see that the term or the prefix or suffix, which is the common link between the opponent's mark and the applicant's mark, already forms part of numerous other trademarks which are registered in favor of other proprietors. So here, won't it be reasonable for the applicant to submit that if those registered marks belonging to different proprietors, containing the same element, which is the shared element between the opponent's mark and the applicant's mark, can coexist in the registry records, the applicant's mark is also eligible to coexist with them? Moving on to the next round, which is the doctrine of estoppel, which means that a person cannot claim something and obtain some advantage and later on claim something contradictory to obtain some other advantage. So let me give you an example here. For say the opponent's mark is Ayush, and at the examination stage, he had faced objection based on the mark Ayush, which was cited as a conflicting mark in the opponent's examination report. And the opponent submitted in his reply to examination report that his mark Ayush is different from Ayush. And now he has filed an opposition to the mark Ayushi, which is the applicant's mark. So the applicant can easily claim, right, that it would be justifiable for the applicant to claim that since the opponent has admitted that his mark Ayush is different to Ayush, now how can he say that his mark Ayush is similar to Ayushi? So I would refer the case of Shyam Teleling v. Union of India here, where it was held that the doctrine of election that postulates that no party can accept and reject the same instrument. A person cannot say at one time that a transaction is valid and obtain some advantage to which he could only be entitled on the footing that it is valid, and then turn around and say it is void for the purpose of securing some other advantage. What are good evidence one can produce in court to prove prior use? This question comes from Akshay. Hi, Akshay. Good evidences as in, for prior use, you need to prove some invoice, like sales invoice, tax invoice, challans, receipts, whereby, which have been issued on a prior date than the applicant's mark. And also, in addition to that, promotional documents like advertisement, magazine cuttings, newspaper cuttings on a prior date, maybe where the mark was advertised on a prior date. So all these are like good evidence, as you put it, to prove prior use. Okay. Okay, I got none. Whether testimonials count as a good evidence is asked from Janil Shah. Hi, Janil. Yes, testimonial counts as a good evidence. Yes, it comes under a good evidence because, it shows the recognition and the reputation of the concerned opponent or the applicant's products, because testimonials are basically customer feedback over the, quality of the product, which means that they are vouching for the opponent's products. So they are good evidence because it will contribute to proving the reputation of the opponent's or the applicant's products. Yes, annual reports can be used as prior evidence. Okay. Moving on to the ground of honest and concurrent use. This ground, I have kept for last because this may be relied upon by the applicant if the mark is indeed similar and the goods are also similar. Here he can seek relief as an honest and concurrent user, provided he can prove that there has been a substantial amount of use of this mark simultaneously with the opponent, and there has not been a single instance of confusion or deception so far, and the opponent did not object to the use of the applicant's mark so far, right? And then again, it depends on the discretion of the Honorable Registrar.
पानी ले आई जरा, पानी ले।
So we are done discussing with the grounds of defense, and now let's shortly talk about the evidence stage. So after receiving the counter statement from the registry, the opponent gets 2 months time to file evidence by way of affidavit under Rule 45, a copy of which he is supposed to serve upon the applicant. The submissions made in the affidavit are mostly based on building the reputation of the opponent and recognition of his mark. Proofs such as sales invoices, tax invoices, bills, receipts, advertisement materials like newspaper cuttings, magazine cuttings, extracts from the company website, year-wise sale figures, advertisement figures are submitted with the affidavit, and remaining portion is dedicated to paraphrase reply to the counter statement, like the grounds that has been put forth by the applicant in the counter statement. So the opponent can here gets the opportunity of denying those grounds also with relevant proofs. So the affidavit, once received by the applicant from the opponent, the applicant again gets 2 months time to file his evidence by way of affidavit under Rule 46, a copy of which is served upon the opponent. The proof submitted and the statements made are to establish the grounds of the counter statement. I have already spoken about the proofs. I'll repeat, like they are the sale invoices, tax invoices, bills, receipts, challans, advertisement documents, promotional materials, extracts from the applicant's company websites, revealing the trademark, relevant extracts, I mean, and also, some extracts from some of the third-party websites can also be produced to, prove the accessibility or availability of the applicant's product bearing the same mark. Also here, if there are any foreign registrations as well as registrations of the other variants, the extracts of the registry records as well as the photocopy of the registration certificates can be annexed with the affidavit. Finally, upon receiving the affidavit under Rule 46 from the applicant, the opponent gets 1 month time to file an affidavit in reply with further exhibits, totally discretionary if he is willing to submit any further exhibit. And this marks the closing of the evidence stage. And the next course of action is awaiting the opposition hearing. So the opposition hearing, it takes time. At the present scenario, it almost takes like 5 to 6 years approximately to schedule an opposition hearing due to the backlog of the work in the trademarks registry, and both the parties are supposed to appear before the registrar and make their due submissions, and the registrar will then decide the case on the merits of the case. After receiving the order from the registrar, if either the applicant or the opponent is aggrieved with the order, then he can approach the Honorable Appellate Board within 3 months from the date of receipt of the opposition order. And if the opponent or the applicant is still aggrieved with the order passed by the Appellate Board, he can file a petition, a review petition before the High Court. So now I'm done with the presentation and I will take the questions. Okay. Whether the Janil Shah is asking whether these evidences can be countered. Once you're showing the evidence, they can, you can't really counter, but you can say if for say the applicant's mark is not similar or the goods are dissimilar, you can obviously say that the evidences that has been provided by the opponent, if authentic, then definitely it's not relevant in any case because the marks are dissimilar and the goods are also dissimilar. So it anyway it has no applicability in the proceeding. Right. Okay. If we are searching any trademark, Magic Masala monopoly comes under section 28(1). Siddharth, I'm yet to view this judgment. I will get back to you on this. Okay. Hello, if while searching any trademark during search, I come across a registered trademark in a country outside India, not registered in India, which is similar to a mark that I want to register in India, same class. Although TM is territorial right, should I go ahead with filing procedure? Are there any chances of objection, opposition after filing? Please share your view. Okay, so if you come across a registered trademark in a country outside India, so while searching, you mean in the registry records in India, I would believe. So they have an application filed already in India, that means, right? So then definitely if you file the application for a trademark which is similar to, for say, a foreign trademark which has been applied in India, then you obviously have chances to face objection under section 11(1) if that trademark is indeed similar. Otherwise, if there is some dissimilarity, you can proceed with filing definitely. Okay, Mr. R.N. Shukla. Hi, sir. If the TM is used for academic purposes or for non-profit use, whether that is also infringement. Sir, yes, it would be, because if the trademark actually is registered in favor of a proprietor, then if similar to that, if any trademark similar to that has been filed or used, then it amounts to infringement of the registered proprietor's right. Yes, Akshay, if an international trademark is not registered in India, when they apply through MedRIT, will prior use apply? In that case, they can file a convention application. If so, they can claim infringement or passing off depending on the case. Yes, definitely they can, claim infringement and passing off depending on the case. In fact, I would say that, foreign trademarks do have foreign registrations do have some persuasive value over the registry while ascertaining the cases of opposition, as well as while in the examination stage as well. I'll reframe my question, is whether an evidence can be countered on the basis of authenticity, and if yes, how? If it is rational, Janil, then it can be countered. If you feel that the evidence is not authentic, it is fabricated, then you can definitely counter the same. You can definitely counter this, and you can kind of ask for them to, provide certified copy of the evidences, certified by the chartered accountant if they are, for say, approximate sale figures or something. The invoices also has to be certified. So if you think that they are fabricated, then definitely you can challenge the same. Please, okay, Mr. R.N. Shukla wants the presentation to be shared through email. I would, yes, my team will mail you the PPT, sir. And okay, thank you, Siddharth. Thank you, okay, thank you, Akshay. Is there any way to expedite the trademark opposition proceeding, especially after evidence stage? Usually, Bhagyashree, thank you for the question. It takes almost 4 or 5 years due to the backlog of the work at the registry, but we can definitely follow up with letters and with the registrar. Thank you, Janil. So we will close, we'll wrap up the discussion for now. Thank you so much, guys, for attending. It has been a pleasure. Are we supposed, okay, Tushita, are we supposed to deny the annexure provided by the opposite party? We can, Tushita, we can argue on the irrelevance if the marks are dissimilar and the goods are dissimilar, and if we are just like the grounds in your favor, now you can always argue on the irrelevance and the insignificance of the evidence provided by the opposite party. Because since they won't be applicable if the marks are dissimilar and the goods are dissimilar. An entity register, okay. Are we supposed, does any opposition or constituted similar to patent opposition? Sir, we are not discussing patent opposition, but we would be having a PPT like a webinar on patent also. So you can kind of reserve the question, and they would be happy to address the same. Okay, so we would wrap up the presentation, and it was a pleasure talking to you guys, and thank you so much for attending. And Bhumika will share the PPT with everybody. Whoever, please feel free to leave your email IDs with Bhumika, and she will definitely share the PPT with you. So over to you, Bhumika.
Yeah, thanks, Ritvika. It was a great session, and thank you everybody for being an interactive participant here. We would be uploading the video on YouTube very soon, and we'll be sharing it across with all the registered participants. Thank you so much, guys. We're wrapping up now. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.